Independent Senator Bernie Sanders and Democratic Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez rallied thousands of supporters at an event in Arizona last night against efforts by the Trump administration and Elon Musk to reshape the federal government. Take a look.
If any Republican wants to vote their conscience, and if any Republican in the House or the Senate says, you know, maybe it's not a good idea to give $1 trillion in tax breaks to the 1% and then cut Medicaid and education and nutrition. If that person were to stand up and say, I have a problem with that, you know what Musk would do? Musk in 5 minutes would say, we are going to primary you. Your political life is over. That is not democracy. And our fight is to make sure that we remain a democracy. One person, one vote, not billionaires, 5 elections.
We are witnessing an oligarchy in America. And that is when those with the most economic, political, and technological power destroy the public good to enrich themselves while millions of Americans pay the price. And we are at a point where the wealthiest people in the world, like Elon Musk, and all the Republicans enabling him, are turning to loot what is left of Medicaid, Medicare, and Social Security to bankroll even deeper tax cuts and sweetheart contracts for themselves, their fellow billionaires, and their corporations. Fox News and the right wing will have you believe that these American values are something out of the Communist Manifesto. That we believe these things because we went to college and read them in a book somewhere. But let me tell you, Fox News, I don't believe these things. I don't believe in healthcare, labor, and human dignity because I'm a Marxist. I believe it because I was a waitress. Because I scrubbed toilets with my mom to go to school. Because I've worked double shifts to keep the lights on. And because on my worst day, I know what it feels like to feel left behind. And I know that we don't have to live like this anymore, Las Vegas. We deserve better than this, Las Vegas.
Those are two really powerful speeches. What I am struck by, though, and you see it from time to time in American politics, where the people who are considered to be on the far left and the people who are considered to be on the far right are saying the same thing. When they're talking about technocrats, Silicon Valley, billionaires, oligarchs, AOC is saying a lot of what sort of the Steve Bannon wing of MAGA is saying. Like, if you hear Steve Bannon, we've talked about this, if you hear Steve Bannon talking, he will talk about the threat of the billionaires, the threat of the tax cuts, the threat of the technocrats, the threat of, well, a lot of what your father was talking about 30 years ago. And it is amazing how, like, this sort of populist strain comes together at the end of both political spectrums.
That is the message that Democrats should run with. Oligarchy, right. It is, they are getting rich, you are getting nothing. And they need to just go hard at that. They need to let their anger show. They need to just, frankly, move on from a lot of the, you know, Trump, making it so about Trump, but make it about the whole picture, about what he is doing. Bernie Sanders has the message that Democrats need to embrace.
Well, and again, I've heard you talk about this before. It's a politically potent message, not because it's a, quote, Marxist message. It's because it's a MAGA message as well. Again, if you listen to what Steve Bannon says, you listen to other people who are talking about, hey, We don't need to give billionaires and multinational corporations more tax cuts. We don't need to let the technocrats, we don't need Silicon Valley, continue with their monopolies. I mean, these are people who actually say positive things about Lina Khan, too, because they hate a concentration of power. And Elise is just right. I mean, I think she's exactly right. This is where Democrats can actually find common cause with a lot of people who voted for Donald Trump, because we've always talked about the very strange thing that in 2016, the Bernie Sanders supporters, after they couldn't vote for Bernie Sanders, who did they vote for?
Donald Trump.
Donald Trump.
And that common cause, you say, it does bring you surprising fellow travelers. I mean, Steve Bannon openly speaks about he's an admirer of AOC, thinks she's a remarkably talented politician, a political athlete, but also they agree on some of these issues. There is that idea that the elites are the problem, and they're forgetting that working class, the common man. And Eugene Robinson, we're seeing that among this debate right now, front and center for the Democratic Party, we have seen in some of the post-election autopsies, many, including they say, when we become just the party of college graduates, we've lost the working class, or we're in the midst of losing the working class to Republicans. Now, some of that maybe is just a Trump-centric phenomenon. That's too early to know. But talk to us about what you're hearing and seeing. Yeah, Bernie Sanders and Representative Ocasio-Cortez, these are big crowds. There's a real undeniable energy out there on this message.
Absolutely. It's look at that crowd for Bernie Sanders. I mean, that was a huge, arena packing crowd that came to hear his message about the oligarchy, and it's also about corruption. Right, that's the other part of it. The corrupt nature of these relationships and these essentially government handouts to people like Elon Musk, who should be one of the most prominent poster children for the kind of message that Democrats need to deliver. And there are others out there who are going around who are addressing this oligarchy corruption message, like Senator Andy Kim in New Jersey, who's having town halls in Republican districts and getting a big response. So it's interesting, and this is probably right. It's happening out there in the country. It's not happening in Washington. It's not happening between Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries. It's happening in the grassroots, and that's where where powerful movements start.
John, we've talked about it all the time, how a lot of Americans in Middle America aren't really that ideological. I tell this story all the time about how people that voted for Bobby Kennedy after he was assassinated voted for George Wallace. We've talked about how people who were going to vote for Bernie Sanders in 2016 after he's out of the race and beaten by Hillary Clinton, they vote for Donald Trump. Talk about populism and how, whether you're talking about populism on the left or populism on the right, there is this uniting feature that, again, deep suspicion for good reason, as the middle class and the working class fall further and further behind. Tax cuts for billionaires, tax cuts for Silicon Valley, tax cuts for multinational corporations, the allowing of these technological giants, these conglomerations to continue getting bigger and bigger, to become basically monopolies, and the federal government, both Republicans, Democrats, not doing anything about it.
Well, part of this is on sort of the darker side of this, as we've all talked about now for a decade, is there's the element of fear. There's the sense of powerlessness and the fundamental human instinct to want to define and understand and therefore fight back against that which makes you fearful, right? So that's an animating force in all politics, and it has been particularly ferocious over the last decade in American life. But there's also, as you're saying, a substantive and I would argue positive element of populism, which is sometimes those who are fearful are right to be afraid. And there are policy steps, there are arguments to be made in the public square that can try to bring what Lincoln called an open field and a fair chance to American life. And in many ways, this was a talk Lincoln gave in 1864 in August. It was kind of an economic version of the Gettysburg Address. The Gettysburg Address was about our ideal as a country, that we were conceived in liberty. We should judge ourselves by the degree to which we live into the Declaration or we fall away from it. He gave a talk in the campaign of 1864 where he said that the war may go on for several years, but it's worth it because it means that we would have an open field and a fair chance for your industry, intelligence, and enterprise. And what populism is an attempt to combat those forces that would limit and control our industry, intelligence, and enterprise.
This is a fascinating conversation within the party, too, because you've got, depending on the state you're in, it's a different conversation. At a town hall in Flint, Michigan on Wednesday, Democratic Senator Elissa Slotkin seemed to take issue a little bit with the progressive wing of her party when asked by a voter how she would, quote, step up for us, like Ocasio-Cortez and Sanders. Senator Slotkin replied this way, quote, everyone you mentioned has a lot of words, but what have they actually done to change the situation with Donald Trump and the cuts and the attacks on our judiciary and the attacks on our Constitution? Senator Slotkin continued, all of those things require me to be more than just an AOC. I can't do what she does because we live in a purple state and I'm a pragmatist. Obviously, Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez lives in a very Democratic district of New York City. So, Gene, when you take a look at this, yes, there are going to be variations, but they're all kind of making the same argument, which is there are a bunch of billionaires in Washington led by Elon Musk, that image of him with a golden chainsaw celebrating the fact that he's slashing and burning his way through the government, eliminating jobs by the thousands. But they're making the same point, which is your job, your livelihood is in the hands of a group of billionaires who are handpicked from the patio at Mar-a-Lago, running the country for their own benefit, giving themselves massive tax cuts, et cetera. And so the message you hear in different ways from both AOC, Bernie Sanders, and in a different way, Senator Slotkin, is just that. It is a form of a populist message.
Yeah, maybe you frame it differently in you know, but maybe AOC and Congresswoman and Elissa Slotkin, frame it differently. But in fact, there are a lot of people in Michigan who will respond to that message, who will understand that message, and who will use it, you know, as a sort of guide, a filter through which to view what's happening. And it is. I think that is. I think that hits home, and it does so in purple states and districts as well as in blue ones, and it does so in red ones as well.
I was going to say, the message Bernie Sanders and AOC, take that to Macomb County, and in the words of Hank Williams, Sr., you'll be setting the woods on fire. I mean, that's a strong message that wins in places like Macomb County, Stephen. You know, the thing is, and I know you know this because you've been involved with the Democratic Party for a very long time. It takes the AOCs and the Bernies out there revving the crowds up. And it takes the Senator Slotkins in Washington doing what they're doing. I mean, it takes both wings to make any party work, right?
Well, it does, but let's put this in a little bit of perspective, because for the last 6 years, 8 years plus, we have known that Donald Trump's policies favor the rich. His tax cuts that they're now going to try to extend back from 2017 would have delivered 85% of their benefits to people making more than $75,000 a year or business. We have known, we went through the whole first Trump team. We know that Trump favors business. We know that Trump favors rich people.
So why did Democrats lose to families earning less than $50,000 last year?
Because, well, so the point is, we have not been able to convince people that Trump is bad for them. I think everything Sanders and AOC are saying is fine, but then you get to the policies. Do we really want to go back to Medicare for all, the Green New Deal, defund the police, women playing men's sports, potentially. Do we really want? That's where I think ultimately we lost, because those people who make less than $50,000 a year couldn't relate to the far left policies. The rhetoric is great about Donald Trump, but then you get to the policies, and Alyssa Slotkin is speaking, I think, more the reality of what we have to do as a party.